Benny Gabbana. Memories of my life. Year 1906 to 1970. I am not a poet nor a big writer, but with this description of my life story, there are precious memories that I cherish greatly. Detroit, Michigan, year 1971. The facts described in this book are written by the author about the memories of his life. My name is Beniamino Gabbana, born in Fiume Veneto, province of Udine, Italy. My parents Luigi Gabbana and Giuseppina Tamari. Born on June 15, 1902. Now I am starting to describe the memories of my life. In the year 1906 H4, one day I was traveling in a big farmer chariot pulled by two horses without knowing my destination. I was in a big provincial road crossing a big river, the Tagliamento River, that was full of rushing water because of the long days of continuous rain. The water was reaching the edge of the road and I was very afraid of this big noise that was going to reach the Adriatic Sea with a large debit. Once past the bridge I was able to calm down and we continued the provincial road until we find a small village named Savigliano, and that was the final destination to settle. My father and his three brothers had rented a parcel sharing the fruit of their labor, also called shared crop, 50% to the owner and 50% for their own needs. Arrived to the new residence, each of the brothers chose a room for their own accommodation. Being from a large family, everyone did their best without any family problem. In a few days everyone was full swing at work because their expertise in farming jobs. Mother was not made for this type of work, but she adapted to those insupportable tasks without a sign of frustration. Every morning, she took my brother Angelo and myself on the field to play without any supervision. Playing with clay was amusing, so I started eating the clay without thinking of any wrongdoing. After many long days, Mother noticed a big change on my sick face, but was not aware that I was eating clay. Quickly she took me to the doctor, who diagnosed me in no time and re-established my health. After a few short months, my mother gave birth to another baby and was named after her own father, Vincenzo Tamari. After 2 years, Mother was not contributing much to help with work in the fields. So my father decided to consult with his three brothers, and without rancor they split up. He then moved back to Fiume Veneto, where he found work in construction making the bridge of the Meduna River. But even this work did not last very long. In this period many people emigrated to America, more precisely Canada. In a short time he decided to take this long journey as well. The extension included a barn, and he also bought a cow to provide the children with food like cheese, butter, milk. This purchase helped a lot with the finances. During this period of time, after the daily chores, Mother was baking for other people in exchange for food and clothing. In my memories, she had endured a very difficult life to provide for the children. It is now the year 1913. I am at the end of my grade school years and was awarded an honor certificate for being a very good pupil. 1 year went by without making a decision for my future. I met an old retired teacher and discussed with him about my future. He was aware of my good school grades and suggested that I study in his private school in his house. I went home and told my mother about this encounter. She was very pleased, accepted my decision. But money was scarce. I did school for about 1 year with good results. My goal was to be an architect, but the school was far away and I needed a bicycle. Facing reality, that money was not there, I decided not to pursue my dreams, and not having any rancor toward Mother. My mother was very disappointed with the decision I made. Year 1916. Italy declared war on the German Empire. Mothers all over Italy are crying for fear of not seeing their sons again. After 1 year has passed, there was a need for civil and military repairs, trenches, tunnels, and mule trails. Italy decided to form squads of civilians, working under the authority of the military, for periods of 3 months, or be drafted. While forming a team in my village, I enrolled in it, but with my mother's authorization, and under guidance of a more senior worker. Our destination was Cormans, on the mountain of San Carino. We started with tunneling and trenches. The Italian artillery was stationed on this mountain, and received daily bombardments from Mount San Michele, and also from Carso. Our job was to repair the damaged sites. Many soldiers are from my village. One night the Germans started an artillery bombardment that lasted 2 full days non-stop. I climbed on top of Mount San Carino and observed, as the city of Gorizia fell in German hands. It was like as if all the world was on fire. There was an incessant ballet of ambulances to transport the wounded soldiers to the hospital. After 2 long months in the area, the order came to send everyone toward the city of Trento. The advancing enemy is now on Italian soil and threatening the city. Right away we started digging trenches to help our troops. During that period of time, a lieutenant stopped in front of me and asked how old I was. I told him the truth. He was surprised and offered me work preparing food for the team digging trenches. I accepted, and that also included doing the dishes. The work was too much for me, and he decided to send me a helper who happened to be a very beautiful girl of my age. I did not know how to introduce myself to her. Finally I asked her name. It was Norma Scalabrine. I then told her mine. Every day spent with her made my heart pound. I could not declare my feelings to her. I was in love, and thinking about her every night. The lieutenant became her friend, and more. Meanwhile, my 3 months of service was up, and I returned home. After 1 month of doing nothing, with my father, we took another 3 months of service doing the same job. However, we were reassigned to Borgogna, at the top of the mountain of Stole. It took more than 1 hour of walking, enduring the cold weather conditions of the mountains, to join the site. We worked 2 days, then we deserted, without thinking of the consequences. We abandoned the site, and went in the direction of Caporetto. Without a passport we were like lost lambs. The Carabinieri, which is Italian for police, questioned us, and took us in under arrest. The lieutenant was furious, and asked who was the leader of this insubordination. Everyone was silent, so my father said it was him. Right away they took my father to the office, to teach him the military rules in a war zone. We received our passports back, with the mention of not being able to be employed again, because we left without a cause. Again, crossing the mountains we arrived home. After 2 months, we had gotten our passports cleared again, and once again, returned to the war. This time making mule trails. This did not last long, and again we are back home. In June, working again in Forni di Sotto Carnia region, sleeping on pine branches. The wind blew everything away, we are living on nothing. We decided to return home, 40 kilometers on foot, walking on a snowy mountain, without food or sleep for 2 days. Morale was low, and the soldiers were disoriented. Entire families took refuge in central Italy, because the German troops were advancing into Italy. At the same time, the Italian government made a call to draft people, born from 1872 and 1902, to regroup in central Italy, for military service. My father and I did qualified for this, but we ignored the order, and stayed with our family. In less than 2 days, the German troops took the Veneto area, looting, raping, stealing, and killing many. They were acting like animals. In the process, they destroyed many historical items and places. If we objected, they beat us up, or we were deported in concentration camps. Punishment galore. I remember one of my uncles and his son died of starvation in a camp. Horror was our daily life. Most of the time I was hiding in ditches, with a long gun to be safe. The Italian police was arresting people like me, but we outsmarted them. Our food was mostly made of pumpkin and corn. Luckily we kept our cow hiding in the dry ditches, which helped a lot, for the younger family members. Our parents, living those horrors every day, did their best to keep a humane way of living. On a selected day, not known to anyone, we returned the bell to the priest. He received it with a big smile, and was thanking us for our courage. On Armistice Day, the bell was ringing again, to the surprise of the population. During the next 12 months, we lived under great stress. Our lives had no value under the German occupation, and we prayed for freedom. In that 1 year, horrible memories are the only thoughts left with me, that will follow me lifelong. On November 4th, morale was low for the German soldiers and their Austrian allies because the retreat was underway. Shortly after, We learned that the Italian army passed through enemy lines, capturing a lot of enemy soldiers. That was the end of the German Empire. The following morning, the Italian troops moved into our village. The population had tears in their eyes. The end of the nightmare. We have helped our troops to locate the collaborators, capture them, and punishment was due. On November 11, 1918, the armistice was signed. What a relief. Many families did not see their loved ones return. That was a heartbreaking moment. The year is now 1918. After the signature of the armistice, normal life was back. I found a job, rebuilding a bridge on the Tagliamento River, that was destroyed with bombardments. I worked for about 4 months, up until springtime. When the contracting firm Antonini was hiring for a large reconstruction job in the city of Spezia, rebuilding the port, I got hired. I worked there for 6 long months, and returned home to my family, that was now made of 5 brothers and 3 sisters. I spent the winter with them. In 1920 another job in Toscana, Arezzo province, in the city of Castel di Sabbione. The work was to dig up lignite, to be used as coal. This position lasted 6 months of very hard labor, for someone my age. Unexpectedly, I received a letter from my father, informing me that if I wanted to join him in Canada. My decision was fast to accept the offer. Many people in those years had left Italy for the New World, in search of fortune and freedom. In a few days, I had my papers ready for my departure. It was decided, November 1st, Days of All Saints I will leave. Year 1920, November 1st. Departure to America. Filled with melancholy, that was my last night I spent with my family. I treasure this moment. At 10 o'clock, it was time for me to leave. Nobody was talking, and my eyes met with my mother's eyes. No tears in our eyes, only in our hearts. Not a word has been said between us. The moment of separation is something unforgettable. My brother Vincenzo accompanied me at the train station. Emotional embraces filled with memories. I traveled through the Veneto region, then Lombardy and Piedmont. I reached the Italian-French border in the city of Modane. The train stopped for 2 hours to clear customs. I am now en route to Paris, and it is night time. Then on to the port city of Le Havre, to board the transatlantic named Sicilian, property of a British company. With a loud whistle, the boat was leaving port for the New World, discovered by our Christopher Columbus. I was at sea for 28 days, and endured very bad weather during this time period. Finally we arrived in Quebec, Canada. After being cleared by customs, each of us on board was leaving for their own destiny and dreams. Very confused in this new land, because of the language barrier, but with the help of the translators, I was directed to my destination. After 4 days by train, I arrived in a small train station, exactly as my father described it in his letters. I am now in Alberta, and I have to reach a small village named Diamond City. There are another 8 miles by train that is required to reach the mines camp. After a 2-hour walk, I reached the house of my uncle Giuseppe Tomai. He was living here for many years. I was welcomed by the entire family. After 2 days of rest, my uncle that was well known, found me a job in a mine. My father had once worked in this abyssal hole. An older English man instructed me about this new job. I could not have found a better person, and told him of my gratitude. This life of obscurity, illusions, and fantasy was not for me. Already I was thinking of a new venue. I went to Calgary, then to a small village named Seed, to extract stones to make cement. It lasted 6 months. Meantime my father has returned to Canada, and was working on the Niagara Falls Canal. Without letting him know, I left Seed to join him. When I arrived in Niagara Falls, I was in store for a big surprise. The site was deserted, because the canal was finished. All the workers had left for new ventures. My father too had left, and nobody knew of his new address. Days went by, no more money. I was sleeping, and eating like a homeless person. My food consisted of apples, not even ready to be picked. I could not go any further, when by luck, I met a person that knew about my father. Back then, it was wise to give your address to everyone that you worked with, just in case they could help you to find a new job. I wrote to my father, and promptly he sent me some money to meet him in his new job, cutting down trees for a paper mill. After 2 months, I was hired at the paper mill. My work consisted of taking care of big furnaces full of ashes. The boiling water caused difficulties for breathing. In those days work was scarce, and paychecks very small. After 1 year of this torment, I left my father, and went to Port Nickel. Again every job was an illusion. What should I do? I took the train to Toronto, and soon found a job laying concrete on the roads. My job consisted of pouring bags of cement in the mixer. After 2 days, my hands were full of blisters and I left the job too. Direction Hamilton, an Italian contractor, was building roads, and I was hired. After 2 weeks, I was fired without any reason given to me. That summer I was back in Toronto, and applied for work in Calgary to pick up corn. Transportation was free to the destination. At that time my brother Giuseppe was with me, and we traveled together, for this unknown destination. In Calgary we went directly to the employment office. The farmer took us to his house, and gave us food, then to the field to start work. During this time, we meet a boy from Hungary, that used to work at the same mine, as I did once before. The mine was on a very long strike, but now it is over. The next day we both decided we wanted to go back there. I wanted to leave the farm work, and invented an excuse that not too far one of my brothers wanted to see me. Very understanding, the farmer gave me permission to be absent for a few days, and even gave me money to travel. In Diamond City, I was again hired at the mine. Shortly after, my brother Giuseppe joined me, but he did not like this kind of work and left for California. 2 months after, another brother aged 16 came to work with me at the coal mine as an helper for a machine cutting into coal veins. After 4 months, the company went bankrupt and again a new adventure awaited me. Vincenzo Tomai, one of our cousins, was with us, and he said he had a brother-in-law in Windsor, Ontario. All our hopes were soon destroyed. After 4 months we did not find a single day of work, and we were living day to day with no more money in our pockets. I am now 22, not having found a single day I had enjoyed in my youth, thinking how can I continue this kind of life, with no future? Day after day I was looking over the Detroit River, hoping to get there in Detroit. One day with another friend, Antonio Granzil, we had established contacts with people doing night cross-border of contraband, paying $50 at our own risks. On this same day, with my friend, we took the regular boat to Detroit. Not having the proper documentation, we had to return back to Windsor. Hope was not lost yet. We purchased another ticket and used the ferry. Once we got to the American side, we benefited with the confusion of other passengers and skipped through. We are now in the U.S. walking for a half hour without saying a single word, concerned that someone followed us. There was a name and address in my pocket, Francesco Zuccato. We knew his house was not far. When we reached our destination, my friend opened his door, and we embraced full of joy. We are welcome. He asked us to stay with his family, an example of human virtue. This friend helped us to find a job. After 4 days, Ford Motor Company hired us. It was a dream, everything was perfect. After 2 months, my brother Vincenzo arrived. I was reassured to find him safe. I continued my work for about 2 years, but one day my workstation machinery did not work properly, making my task more difficult. The report I sent to my supervisor went nowhere, so I contacted his boss, and he agreed with me about the state of the equipment. Now my supervisor was threatening me. Being tired of the situation, I grabbed the supervisor's neck. He apologized for inflicting me such bad treatment. Briefly after I resigned, to avoid other consequences. Soon I was working in tunneling. It was very hard work, but my solid physical strength allowed me to continue for a long time. During that period I met many new friends. Every Saturday was dance and banquet in those friends' houses. A brand new life for youth like me. In this prohibition time, the contraband business was flourishing. During our Saturdays parties, we drank alcohol. A friend of mine offered me to work with him. Without thinking of anything in particular, we went to this house garage, where a man was loading barrels of beer. In the return trip, I was thinking this is not legal, and I wasn't illegal in this country, but I went anyways. At the same time, coming out of the front door, was a teenage girl giving me a look and a smile I could not forget. I continued this work of transportation more and more often. A friendship started to take place between her and me. It was not easy for us to meet one-on-one, because her family traditions do not allow to do so in this way. According to her family tradition, I should have asked her father to marry her. I did so. Without hesitation he asked for 2 weeks to inquire about me. He gave me permission to enter his house. The situation was an embarrassment to me, because my English was very poor, and her dialect very different. But we kept the flame alive. Next week, according to their tradition, they invited 2 families to meet the future couple. Giuseppina, that was her name, encouraged me, and that kept our friendship. I could not have a single day alone with her, to discuss our future and to know each other better. After a month of guerrilla observation by her family, I decided to marry her as soon as possible. According to her family tradition, my financial position was not in line with their expectation for Giuseppina. It was not possible to explain to her father because he was so severe. I took the liberty to write a letter explaining my financial situation. That infuriated him, and he called Giuseppina, and then took the engagement ring off of her finger, and gave it back to me. "You are free again," he said. This unexpected situation left me heartbroken. 2 days went by without news, and she had to go to New York for 2 days to forget about me. The night before she was supposed to leave, through one of her sisters, we talked on the phone, and I learned what her father had planned for her. Crying, she said she would have accepted all of my decisions and kept her word. Now we understand each other, and at midnight we plan to meet at the train station, for an unknown destination. In my room, I left a letter explaining that I was a man of honor, and everything will be okay in our escape. The father searched for us all night long, but could not find my car. I had switched cars with a friend. It is at this point, I must stop my grandfather's story, and relate what else happened that night. Her father with some other men, cornered my uncle Vincenzo. They held a shotgun to his head and threatened to shoot him if he didn't tell them where they ran off to. Vincenzo never said a word. Driving all night long, not knowing which way we are going. In the morning we are in Gary, Indiana. We had breakfast, and waited for the office of the Justice of Peace to open, to start the paperwork for our union. After having waited for a week, we were married at the church. We provided our parents all the pertinent information of our new status. We stayed in Gary for 1 month, and I found a job in Hammond, Indiana, but this did not last long. My information tells me that at home, everything is back to normal, and we returned. We rented a small house near her parents' home. Giuseppina learned that certain days her father was not home, and she visited her mother. Tears, crying, everybody was happy, but not a word was said. Shortly after, all the bad memories of this situation have been forgotten. One question remains: her father. Doing deliveries, her father was near our house. Giuseppina waited for her father to come out, and both fell into each other's arms. He allowed us to return to his home, and everything was forgotten. I profusely apologized to her father for all the commotion that I have caused. He accepted my apologies. I found a job tunneling. It was hard work and dangerous. I lasted 3 months. My father-in-law asked me to work for him in bootlegging. He assured me that if anything would happen to me, in other words getting arrested, he would take care of the situation. I accepted. After 6 months, the federal police arrested me for transportation of prohibited substance. After 24 hours I was free again, having paid the fine. After that, I returned to my usual work. On July 2, 1928, Giuseppina gave birth to a beautiful boy of 11 pounds. We named him Luigi, in honor of my father, because he was our first. By the time Luigi was 18 months old, healthy, playful, everything that characterize a healthy baby, when he fell ill. The doctor diagnosed him with cerebral meningitis, then pneumonia and bronchitis. What else did he need? He died after 4 days at the hospital, leaving us devastated. In 1931, again, Giuseppina gave birth to a very small baby girl of 5 pounds. We named her Noreen, but Grandma started to call her Dolly, and that name stayed with her. Again I was arrested, for the same reason as before. I had to spend 1 month in care of the federal police. During this time, my brother Vincenzo took my job. Real jobs were scarce and everyone was poor. After only 1 week, Vincenzo too was also arrested, and this terminated our association in business. I went to Kentucky to look for work in the coal mines, but after 2 weeks it was obvious, there was no work for newcomers. I am back in Detroit. The city of Detroit was improving the railroads. The pay was $15 per week, not even sufficient enough to live on. Then President Hoover was chased from the White House, because of his lack of charisma for the people. Mr. Roosevelt took power, and brought quick changes. The prohibition laws are repealed, thus created opening for many jobs. He then launched a national work program, to improve the lives of the American people. We had a used truck, and decided to go in business to transport beer to restaurants. We hoped to make good on it. We selected 4 brand names. They were not selling well, because the best brands were the monopoly of the gangs. We failed in this new venture. I returned to work at the tunnel for about 6 months. My brother-in-law suggested that we open a beer store for the Italian community, in which we are well known. I told him that my financial situation was not in good condition, so he agreed to cover all the expenses, to start this new adventure, hoping to make a good profit. For about 2 years we were doing okay, but no more. Then the situation started to get worse. Luckily, at that time Giuseppina was working in the auto industry, and this gave time to reimburse all of our debts. We exited the venture with the Italian community. I was obstinate to continue in business, and I invested in a small restaurant. This too was going down day after day. After 6 months, we had to close, thus increasing our precarious situation. I was lucky to get a job at Detroit Edison for about 2 years. During this time, we improved our finances. Hard times again. Detroit Edison laid off 25% of its people according to seniority. A friend had me hired at a winery, the Brawny Wine Company. The paycheck was very small. I had an hernia that was not taken care of, during the time that I was supposed to serve in the army. Year 1953, the world was at peace again, so I decided to take a trip home after 33 years of absence. My father has now passed away some time ago. My mother's medical condition was not the best, so it was the last chance to meet her in her life of misery, wars, and being poor. My mother was waiting for us with tears in her eyes, and not many words. My sister Celestina, and her family from Latina, came to visit us. My brother Gino was still a war prisoner in England, and was supposed to be released any day now, but we did not meet. During my stay, in family, we discussed my sister Nina's situation. Being a widow with 4 children, she was most destitute. To describe her past you have to be a poet. My sister Maria was working at the cotton factory, and also taking care of our mother that was incapacitated. I was petrified seeing such a state of despair. At the end of my stay, Mother was counting the hours that we still had together, knowing full well that was the last time we will ever see each other. With a smile on her face, she said, "Thank God, I had a chance to see one of my sons during the daytime." I walked to the village to meet old friends. The changes are obvious, improvement to the village and some other raised altogether. En route to Milan, then taking the airplane back home. Giuseppina and Noreen were anxiously waiting for me. They found me fat. In fact, I gained 20 pounds in Italy. To my brother Vincenzo, I told him the truth about what the family situation was back home. Brother Gino was released from POW, and he found no employment or future in Italy. With Vincenzo, we started a plan to bring Gino to Toronto. To sponsor a person, we had to find someone willing to do it. We had family and friends in the city. We found that person, willing to sponsor him for a minimum of 1 year. We obtained the necessary documentation quickly, and 1 month later, Gino was in Toronto, free in a land of opportunities. At first he worked at a farm, but soon, with the help of the Tamai family and others, he landed a job in a garage fixing cars, and that was his trade. We are happy because we knew him since birth. 1 year later, we discussed the disastrous situation of Sister Nina, and decided to bring her and family to Canada on arrival. Gino had everything ready for them. Finally they could have a human life. 2 years after, Mother passed away. It was time to think about Sister Maria, that has taken care of Mother to the very end. She and her family soon came to Toronto. This was a great improvement in their lives. Many years passed when on Christmas night, alone, my mother appears in my dreams. Not knowing how to honor her, I wrote this little poem. My mind fly over the sea, where a mother remembering her son, was praying days and nights without end, dropping tears from her eyes. Christmas is, and soon New Year, but for a mother, a faraway son is of a great sadness. In my infant days taking care of me, today you remain only with memories. Darn destiny that could shake even the universe, your son is praying for you, Beniamino Gabbana. Finally, all of these difficulties behind us, everyone was established. Giuseppina and I have discussed about a trip in Europe, where I still have brother Giuseppe, and sister Celestina, with their respective families. The day of departure arrived.
It is at this point of the story, I am going to finish out the rest of his autobiography, with pictures I have found in my grandmother's attic, showing a history of the Gabbanas and Jacquinas together.
Detroit, Michigan, August 10, 1963. Touristic trip to the Old World. August 10, 1963, we left the city of Detroit, crossed the border and boarded a plane in Windsor. Canadian Airlines was the name of the company. In the car was Giuseppina, myself, with dear friends Giuseppe Chiarini, and his distinguished wife Libera. Our driver was Noreen with her 4 children. 9:00 p.m. was the departure time, and I said goodbye to my entire family. First stop is in Toronto to board other passengers. Then another stop in Montreal, to refuel and boarding more passengers. From the night sky, Montreal was like Christmas night, lights everywhere with a multitude of colors. Then a total obscurity below us, we are above the Atlantic Ocean. Everyone on board was in a good mood, because we all are going to see our dear family members, after so many years apart. To cross the Atlantic, it took us 12 hours, and we landed in Rome Leonardo da Vinci Airport. Our heart was racing, not only for me but for Giuseppina as well, to see a city that she has heard so much about it. Quickly we passed through customs, and a taxi took us to the Plaza Hotel in Old Rome. For us it was magic to see so much art and culture from unforgettable people in our Italian history. This hotel had hosted many famous people during our stay. Seeing all of those incredible pieces of art has left an incredible impression on us. In the morning, after a solid breakfast, we started to visit Rome, the old and new city. All I have learned in school is now in front of my eyes. I was translating for Giuseppina all the comments from the tour guide. We toured the city for 4 days. We saw Villa d'Este in Tivoli. To describe all of that, I will need days and days. A must-see in your life. Next we went to Naples. Our first stop was at a magnificent restaurant named Bersagliera, right in the port of Naples in view of the Vesuvio volcano, exactly as described by the artists, really impressive. After a copious lunch, we drove to see the full view of the Vesuvio volcano, and to the destructed city of Pompeii, that was engulfed in ashes from the famous eruption. We spent 2 hours to visit the ruins of the city. We continued to the city of Amalfi, an artistic panoramic view. In the evening we are in Sorrento. Our hotel was surrounded by a huge garden, with beautiful flowers. Around 8 p.m., we went to a nightclub flooded with all kind of lights that resembled paradise on earth. The first show was a Neapolitan tarantella, with local stage costumes that lasted for 1 hour. then dancing to the music of popular songs and classics. We lived a night of dreams. After a good night's sleep and a good breakfast, we took a small boat to go to the island of Capri. On the first stop we switched boat to visit the natural cave of Grottozier, also known as Blue Caves. The tour guide gave us explanations, before returning to the first boat at the pier. We boarded a tour bus that took us on the high hill of the island to the Hotel Europa. For young people, visiting this island, surrounded with blue water, is an unforgettable memory. 2 days spent at the hotel, then we walked back to the pier and boarded the return trip to mainland. Our guide was a charming young Neapolitan boy that spoke several languages, played several music instruments, and was also singing Neapolitan songs. To hear him perform gave us goose skin. We even forgot that we were so far away from home. His name was Michel. Back in Sorrento, then we continued our trip toward the Liguria coast, going through many cities in Monte Cassino, site of a famous WW2 battle. Salerno, Latina and Rome again. 1 day of rest in Rome. Next morning we went to the train station, and booked our trip north to Veneto. The first stop was Pordenone Hotel Moderna. This is a city of many of my memories of my young years. For 4 days we visited Fiume Veneto, the cemetery where my parents are entombed, then we visited friends and family. We visited my parents' house, and Giuseppino wanted to know everything of my youth here. I did find my uncle and family. Heartbroken, we continued our trip to Udine, then Prato, a city full of tourists, because of its beaches on the Adriatic Sea. We meet a doctor that was family with the Martinuzzi. He invited us for dinner, the best food and the best wines were on the table. Then we thanked him before leaving. We continued toward Trieste, a city with an historic past of wars, conflicts even as we speak. We stayed at the Hotel Excelsior, visited Castel Miramar, and many other cities. Also a big nightclub, a beer brewery called Austriaca, filled with tourists of many nationalities, dinner and dancing to the wee hours. In the morning we headed towards Cortina in the mountains. The funiculars transporting tourists from one mountain to another one. We could not find accommodations, so we continued to Pordenone. The most dangerous roads in the world, is what you can call those roads with steep cliffs everywhere. We paid to stay alive. In Pordenone we needed to rest our old bones, so we slept until late in the morning. In Venice we took the water taxi on the Grand Canal, and visited St. Marco Plaza. We also visited the Dog Palace, many churches. Many pigeons dropped on us. On a gondola, we visited the Lido and Burano the glass factory. To describe the city we need many days, so much to see, so much to do. After 2 days we departed for Milan. In Milan we stayed at the Hotel Splendido, and we rested well. The next day, in a very good mood, we visited the Dome, the train station Monumental, the Scala and the cemetery where rests our first Prime Ministers of Italy, Camillo Conti of Cavour, Giuseppe Mazzini and our Grand Music Maestro Toscanini. Also many commercial streets. Our stay was too short to enjoy everything. Direction Lake Major to Chiasso at the Swiss border. A panoramic beauty to see. Then Genoa, the birthplace of Christopher Columbus that discovered America, and especially the house of Marconi. The cemetery in that city is so beautiful that according to me, it cannot be copied. We continued to the Liguria coast, San Margherita, Rapallo and Portofino, city of lovers. At this point we had to separate from our friends to visit our own families. Mr. Martinuzzo returned in his native town, Mr. Chiarini in the Marches in his family, and I, crossing Switzerland, landed in French territory, where my brother Giuseppe and his family are living. We had some trouble because of the language barrier, but everything was solved. Arrived in the city of Metz, the big city near my brother's town some 20 kilometers away. Finally we arrive at our destination. We entered the residence unexpected and to everyone's surprise. My brother was napping. I opened the bedroom door, he woke up and asked me what I was doing here, is it real or a dream? He was speechless. We greet each other with tears in our eyes, after 41 years of separation. Back in the kitchen, he saw Giuseppino for the first time. everyone kissing each other, the entire family. In no time the house was full of his children and spouses to greet us from America. Shortly after, a reporter came in, took pictures and published a long story in the local newspaper, about two brothers meeting after so long. The next day the newspaper was out, and every neighbor was watching the Americans through their windows. The next day my brother introduced me to his many friends. In the evenings there was always a special meal, that ended with musical instruments and old Italian songs till late at night. We spent very happy days with Giuseppe and family, but unfortunately we had to leave knowing that we probably will not see each other again. Our hearts are sad. We arrive in Rome again, and purchase 2 tickets for Latina to visit my sister Celestina, that was anxiously waiting for us. With this long trip, there are many things to say, but let's go to the principle of it. At my sister residence, there was nobody home, and the neighbor gave us directions for the summer house on the beach. When we showed up, there was a big commotion for this unexpected and surprise visit at this site. Giuseppina was introduced to the entire family. We spent 3 very happy days visiting many places on the Tirreno coast, Anzio, Nettuno Felice movie star residence, and many of the best nightclubs that we could not imagine that existed. A very unique place to live. 2 more days spent in their company and we are back in Rome to meet our American friends. We have now 3 days left in our trip and visited the Eternal City, nightclubs in the evening with music that lasted till the morning. Something that we will not forget. For the last morning in Rome, we boarded a cab that took us to the Leonardo da Vinci Airport, where a very big plane was waiting for us. We say goodbye one last time to the land of our ancestors. Around 10 a.m., we flew to Portugal, then Santa Maria Azur for refueling, and finally to Montreal, where our priest Giulio Cancelli was waiting for us. Another stop in Toronto, where many family members are welcoming us back. Another hour of flight and we are in Windsor, to meet our own entire family. Our grandchildren happy to see us disembark the plane. They say, "Grandpa, one day we will certainly fly to the moon." Year 1964, Detroit, Michigan. Tourist trips in Canada and the U.S. I, with my wife, brother-in-law Domenico Guzzardo, and his distinguished cohort Filipina, we left Detroit in direction of Ontario, Canada, Thousand Islands. With a tourist charter boat, we toured this beauty of nature for about 2 hours. After returning to the pier, we took a different boat to the St. Lawrence River, up to Montreal where we stayed 2 days. We visited the St. Joseph Oratory and many other cities. Montreal is a beautiful city but a bit confusing because of the language spoken there. It was difficult to understand their dialect. The city is very old, and built like the European type of construction, but there are interesting sites to visit, at least for me. Visit at the Church of St. Anna di Buper, place of many miracles. Our trip lasted 1 week, then we returned home in Detroit. This trip was not very interesting, so we prepared for next year's trip. Year 1965. New decision, we will travel to Florida. The road through the Smoky Mountains was endless. Finally we arrive at our destination in Miami Beach. We stayed at the Atlantis Hotel, a huge palace in front of this big ocean, where we did swim for about 2 hours every day. By car, we visited the area. Very nice area. One night we went to the Fontainebleau nightclub, but I did not like the vaudeville show, and it was expensive. After 10 days, direction west across Florida to visit the Ringling Brothers for 4 hours. On our way to Sarasota, we stayed one night in St. Petersburg, city of so much interest. In Ocala we visited the Cypress Garden. Walking the alley smelling the flower scent was a gift. On the lake many girls are water skiing, a beautiful show. In Silver Spring, we watched the fish on board of a glass-bottom boat. The lens effect make them bigger than they really are. In Kentucky we visited the Monmouth Cave, a natural beauty. Then we spent 1.5 days in Chicago. It was not very pleasant, because of the street traffic. This ended our Florida trip. Many other things were not of a great interest. Year 1966. I, my wife, and the Guzzardo family, are en route to visit the Washington Monument, and Abraham Lincoln as well, the National Cemetery, the U.S. capital city with its national monuments. We stayed at the Commodore Hotel, near the White House. Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York. We spent 3 days at the West Hover Hotel on the 72nd Street, visiting the Manhattan Canal on a boat and circling Ellis Island. We also saw the giant Queen Elizabeth and passed under the Brooklyn Bridge. On 42nd Street, we took the subway in direction of Coney Island, a huge beach with an amusement park. Very tired, we returned at the hotel. Early in the morning, we walked the streets. Everyone was indifferent to the other people. I am very disappointed. A bus tour took us to the Chinese town. I did not like it because of their disdain against us. We entered a Chinese temple. The sound of the Chinese bell scared us. Of course, nothing interesting for us, because we do not know their culture. Shortly after we returned to the hotel. Leaving New York, we are now in Boston, a very active city. We did not like it, so we rapidly left for Gloucester, to meet my wife's cousin, a fisherman. We were welcomed and stayed about a week with them. Many thanks to them. His name, Salvatore De Caro, a person and family of integrity. This coastline attracted many artists because of its beauty. Touring the area was a treat. Now we are going to Maine, then Vermont, where we stayed one full and pleasant day. Through Montreal along the St. Lawrence River, then to Ottawa, the Canadian capital city. We visited the Parliament building, and many other governmental sculptures. We are not impressed with the city. We arrived in Detroit after a 20 days trip. This was the end of our long journey east. Year 1967. Again another trip. This time we are heading west, always with the Guzzardo family. Direction Arizona, Phoenix, where we stayed 2 days. We found my great friend John Fandon and his wife. We are very welcome. We also meet other people from Detroit. We are now going to Yuma, a torrid desert heat, but of magnificent beauty. San Diego, one of the best cities that we have ever visited. We find many friends that took us around the city. A boat took us to the island of Coronado, and had dinner in a huge restaurant. I wish we stayed longer there. One of our acquaintances very gracefully guided us to visit the city. We are now leaving for Don John Capistrano. This locality has a long history with its nation. Disneyland, we spent an entire day visiting this immense park. Reenactments of the first wave of newcomers from East. Saloon. Drinks, fights, horses, and how they lived. Exactly what we see on TV. Los Angeles was not a city for my taste, so we kind of skipped it. Finally we are in Hollywood. 2 days in that city. First of all we visited the very big cemetery of Forest Lawn, artistically designed and filled with sculptures. During the day, the streets are empty, but at night filled with people and activities. I forgot many names and places that we have visited. At the end it was a very satisfying trip. We paid visits to our many friends, and all invited us for dinner. In Morgan Hill, one of my cousins had a beautiful restaurant. We stayed 2 days. Perfidious welcome. In San Francisco, a beautiful city, many things to see like the Golden Bridge, Alcatraz, and food preparation next to the piers in front of the Pacific Ocean. We visited the Castro Quarter. We stopped to see the daughter of one of my cousins. She owned a beautiful farm cultivating artichokes. She served us a beautiful meal. We returned to her father, Luigi Tonis, in Kinsburg near Fresno. He had a beautiful winery, and we stayed with him for 3 days, even playing bocce. Our unexpected visit was welcome. En route again direction Fresno, through endless fields of fruits and vegetables. We passed through Reno, Nevada, without stopping because our next stop was Las Vegas. We immediately found lodging and went right to sleep. Sleeping during the days and gambling during the nights. This city has a huge population, it is impossible to describe it. Many huge phenomenal palaces filled with money gambling machines. After a few days we are dead tired. We need a rest. We also visited the Mormon temple, but we could not enter it. Instead we walked in the Big Neff location of the biggest organ music in the world, and it was playing. In the museum there were mummies. The Hoover Dam, a technical marvel, then the Grand Canyon, then we headed north. A pleasure for the eyes. The Rocky Mountains in Colorado, roads with cliffs, Our Lady's praying, as usual. In Chicago we stayed only a short time, then back to Detroit. This trip lasted 34 days and we drove for 7,000 miles. We are very happy with the long journeys that we took, throughout all the states. We are now back to normal life. For a year I suffered from the arteries and angina pectoris, but it was not a very serious case. From time to time, the doctor examined me, and gave me cortisone pill. Those pills gave me an infection on my left arm and mouth, causing problems with my dentures, and also I had surgery. At that time, my sister Celestina and family was visiting us, to get to know all of our families. We appreciated their visit, but my medical condition did not allow to really enjoy their company. In the end, all was taken into consideration. I am now retired from work, and in the summer we spend countless days in my daughter's property, in northern Michigan at their summer cabin, that was located near a lake with very clear water, and a beach. I cleared the bushes to make a garden, and for the children to play. I also had a piece of land attached to theirs, so it was a big property. My brother Vincenzo liked the place, and bought 4 parcels, so did Johnny Gabbana. All family was assembled. During the season, the children enjoyed very much just staying there, and we all enjoyed to swim in the lake. A few miles away, 2 of my brother-in-laws also had a summer property, and we invited each other for spaghetti dinners. At the end of one of these voluptuous dinners, I felt an increasingly uncomfortable chest pain to the left side. Both my brothers-in-laws, Bob Kreft and Jack Jacquina, took me right away to the hospital in Clare, Michigan. The emergency service was fantastic and quick. I am now connected to an oxygen line to facilitate my breathing. Giuseppina was constantly at my side, crying and praying for my well-being. By now all the family is back in Detroit, but Jack and Giuseppina stayed with me for a week, then the doctors allowed us to return home, because I was doing better. This was done with a lot of care for this trip home. Noreen came to pick us up, and drove us at the Mount Sinai Hospital, under the good care of Dr. Goldberg. This doctor provided me with the best possible treatment. Despite the distance to our home, Giuseppina visited me every single day after her work. During this period of time, Giuseppina took care of me in a very loving way. A real professional nurse. At the end of the year 1970, I was back on my feet. This is my life up to the year 1970.
My grandfather, Beniamino Gabbana, he passed away in November of 1978. For 8 more years, he filled our lives with joy and happiness. One memory that will always stick with me is after the campfires were out at our cottage, he would always have everybody stick around and sing God Bless America. I never knew the reason why until I read his life story. This film I put together were about the memories of his life. But for anyone who knew the man, the memories he gave us of how to live life is what we will all remember. As with every story of a man's life, this is where it ultimately ends. Here he rests with the one and only love of his life, Giuseppina, or as we know her as, Josephine. Together they will spend eternity together, which is a happy ending to the story. A few yards away rests his daughter Noreen. She made him proud during his lifetime. Neither had a bad word to say about anybody, no matter what they endured through life. As they sit under the watchful eye of St. Thomas, I hope to one day be reunited with them and continue the happiness we all once shared.